Make a statement and get into questions like usual.
Duly noted that I didn't have to do this, right? This was, I said to Bret, let's have a season wrap up. Obviously, going into that last game, I didn't expect that to be the last time that we got together and had a chance to visit as media members as well. So I wanted to do this just to kind of have a closure on 2023. You know, in general, there's a lot of things that happened last year that, you know, in retrospect, I think our players, our coaches, everybody from A to Z that's in the Smith Center every day, wish we could go back and redo, but in the game of football, obviously, just like in life, that doesn't happen. But I would say that overall, disappointed in what it has, but not discouraged in any way. I know that the year before, we were a 8-win football team before postseason play. A lot went into that postseason just with guys not being at the bowl game for the first time. You know, Illinois never went through that before, right? Like kids had never skipped bowl games before because you hadn't been in bowl games. So like that was kind of a newness for everybody, even for me as a coach. The last time I was in it, had never really had a player miss the bowl game. So a lot of newness in last year, and I think this year for us to enter the season, a lot of anticipation, a lot of excitement, and unfortunately fell short of those goals. But I think if we'd reversed things, our guys probably would have approached just natural human nature, just a little bit more of an edge. And I think that's the part to get to where we want to be, the continuous edge, just like I taught those guys a year ago that you got to, you know, stop from being excited about being close to winning games. And this year, I don't know if there was a complacency even in myself or our staff that our players that it was just going to happen. It needed to happen on every play of every day. And I was really upset after the game, obviously, when I said what I said about a potential holding call in the end zone, because I really believe if you don't stand up for what you believe in this world, people will just keep stepping on you, right? And we got to get respect by earning it. And that was just a small microcosm of last year. So since that time, we've doubled down as a staff, had a lot of individual meetings with my coaches. I would say probably half my roster. There's guys that have some years of eligibility if they want to come back can. There's going to be some news of guys moving on and transitioning from our roster. But for the majority of the guys that we've sat down and visited with, I think there's an edge that they have that they want to go. I just talked to Tank this morning. We had our kind of a final workout with our guys. The demeanor of them was very, very positive. Literally the day after our last game, had some recruiting that really went our way, probably as big as it has since I've been here. A couple of really good players and a couple of good situations turned our way. So I'm excited about where we're at. We got a lot of work ahead of us here in December. We'll go hard until the recruiting dead period, and then because of the way it played out, we have another good week in the office before the holidays kick in, and then we'll come back in January and focus on the 2025 roster and recruiting. There'll be some more additional 2024 recruiting, but for the most part, I think that'll be put to bed before the first of the year, and we'll have our roster for the spring, and then jump into winter conditioning and all that goes with it. So I'm excited about that. I'm sure you guys got some specific questions. I'll let open it up.
Bret, you said double down. Do you feel good about your staff moving forward? Do you anticipate?
You know, I get the question. I'm always going to anticipate change, right? I'm just sometimes it comes about naturally. Sometimes you force it, right? And I don't foresee anything at this given point, but I just know, even in the last 48 hours, I've been contacted by people, you know, in regards to people on my staff. So, you know, we do a good job here, I think, of proactively making things as good as we possibly can for the people that we want. And Josh has been incredible about that. And this at this point where I stand right now, the same thing I feel going forward. But it's just it's inevitable, right? I literally talked to a coach, I think Tuesday of that last week. That was a former player of mine that now is in our conference, that was on Oregon State staff, and now he's in our league, right? So it just things literally change overnight. It's pretty amazing.
You mentioned news of players moving on. Reggie Love, just actually before you came in here, posted on social media that he was going to enter the portal. Just was that, I don't know, an expected thing after your conversation?
I think so. Yeah, something we've been going through actually the last couple of years, right? You know, as a head coach, one of the things I have to do, and I always kind of pride myself on, is just kind of feeling those moments before they come. So we've had those conversations before, and I understood where Reggie was coming from. He actually came in, I believe, on Sunday, and I wasn't at all surprised where we're headed.
Retention, everyone focuses on the portal, getting players, but retention, how important is that, and what is the key to retaining your roster?
I'm assuming you're talking about underclassmen.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, so the part that's very unusual right now in college football is you have this COVID year still hanging over you, right? Like guys have 2 year, 1 year. Do they want to use it? You know, some guys have another year left, but I think they're just tired of college, right? And that plays into it, but that factors into our underclassmen, right? So they don't know if those players are coming back, where it's at. Last year, I believe we were number 2 or 3 in the country in fewest the number of portals that transfer out. I still don't think we'll be a big number, but we'll be bigger than we were a year ago because, quite honestly, for me as a head coach, I'm very, very forward and honest with guys that if they maybe don't see things the same way we see them as coaches, I express that's why the portal exists, right? And what it is. Retention is huge. It's a little bit easier once you're on campus and they know who you are and what you represent. I don't think there's any player that leaves our program that would say that as coaches we don't put our best foot forward and show them the light every day. And if it's not what they want, they're obviously not entitled to do it. But retention of your good players, I think, is very important. And not even good isn't a good word, but players that you want to retain that are a good fit for your program, that believe in what you believe in. The DNA of tough, smart, dependable is something you can't just fake, right? It's got to be who you are. So I think it's important to keep those guys. So a lot of our initial for me especially, all of my coaches met with all their players. It's just, I'm literally hopping on a plane today. I headed to the Western State Zone. I've got 8 straight days on the road, I believe, in 12 different states, right? So this next 10 days or next 7 to 8 days are going to be critical for us. But I want to have conversations with certain players before we left, and I think overall every one of them has gone the way I thought it would.
In terms of potential incoming transfers, how do you as a staff manage
Numbers?
All of the new information coming out all the time and whether a kid might be a good fit for your program?
Yeah, again, I give credit to Josh. I could easily see after my first year here that this window of time is kind of insanity. I believe on Tuesday evening, I watched probably anywhere from 50 to 100 players every one of those days that had been cut down from, I believe, 700 players that had entered the portal. And on Monday is the first true day that anybody that hasn't had transition, that is true portal players, will begin on Monday by law, right, legally. But it's just world. It's a crazy world. We received word probably less than 2 months, but not more than 6 weeks, somewhere, I don't know exactly, that a player that we had recruited and just a connection said that this kid might be interested in getting in the portal. But of course, it can't happen till Monday, and we were told the other day that he had 32 offers, right? It's insanity. It's something that we won't do as coaches. We do things by the book and play by it, but unfortunately, a lot of the world doesn't.
Right, last offseason, there was a lot of guys on the fence about their NFL decisions who ultimately came back. How do you expect a large number again this year, and how do you handle it?
It's probably not as big a number. Obviously Isaiah Williams, Tip Ryman, Seth Coleman, to a certain level, Reggie probably was. But guys that have legitimate opportunities to go to the NFL, I think probably not as big as a year ago, but we had, 15 Big Ten, players, honorable mention to first, second team that, those guys are good players and other people know it. So I worry about the NFL, but I actually worry more about, people that are around our players that prior relationships or guys that recruited people out of high school. And, last year I was battling, obviously, not negotiation, but conversations with Johnny, Keith, Julian, and Isaiah Adams, and really to a certain extent Isaiah Williams. And we were talking about their opportunity to stay here or go to the NFL, but some of their biggest opportunities came from schools that were trying to, get them to leave here, right? That were paying more than the NFL. So that's the biggest ones that we worry about.
Bret, how would you evaluate the growth that Aaron made in his first year?
Aaron Henry?
Yeah, as a defensive play caller.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a lot, if obviously the only one to live my career was me, but my first 2 years at the University of Wisconsin, I had a defense coordinator, Mike Hankwitz, who was a great coach, great person, all that goes into it. He transitioned and I promoted within Dave Doran that year. I believe we went 7-6, if I'm not mistaken. I knew we were going to go some of those bumps in the road, and Dave and the staff really rebounded well and learned a lot as a first-year play caller, what you go through. Next year, I believe we won 10 games, and then we won 3 straight Big Ten titles. I'm not saying it's going to play out exactly that, but first-year coordinators go through a lot. There's a lot coming at them, not only game day, but the preparation for game day, the anticipation of what might come. I'm very excited. I worked with Aaron a lot week to week, but I think the growth that we'll have now, January through June to July, are going to be huge. Not only him, but I think for the most part, without a doubt, the staff around him, right? Like Terrence Jamison is an incredibly bright coach. Charlie Bolin was a huge asset. Those outside linebackers playing well the way they did at the end. The growth of Antonio. Andy's been with me a long time. The support staff around him. It's just, I think, a really exciting time. I understand the question, but I think there'll be a huge amount of growth from year 1 to year 2, and especially as much as I can help.
Your first year, you only redshirted only didn't redshirt 3 freshmen. 3 freshmen played their best redshirt. Second year 5, this year 10. Is there anything to read into that? Does the portal world change that math a little bit?
Robert, to be quite honest, you would just hope that, as we progress, we recruited players that maybe could become more player ready. That first year, really, if you remember, right, like I signed, or I came aboard on a Saturday on the Wednesday after signing day. So in that first recruiting class, I added a couple players, but for the most part, that was prior to me being here. I get how it's considered my first year, but one of the guys that played in that class was Pat Bryant, who was part of the class that signed before I got here, and love every minute of every day that he's been. Pat Bryant had an incredibly, I thought, a year that he just grew a lot, and unfortunately got rolled up on that sideline against Indiana. He was just really starting to take off. So kind of every case for what it is, but I do think overall in general now too, for me as a head coach, if anybody can help us play and win one game, we play them, right? Now we got towards the end there. KP, for instance, Patterson, he was a guy that was right on the bubble if he played one more game, so we opted not to play him in that last game. But for the most part, midway through the year, we knew where we were at with guys and said, hey, full go rodeo, let's go. I just think they're a better player a year from now, even if it's a limited amount of exposure. Like the value that Mac Resetic got this year is just incredibly weighted. Same thing, Sabor, Jaheim Clark. I wish we would have got wish we would have got Jeremiah Warren in there a little bit more, but we were playing so good at the defensive line. Alex Bray got a lot of good reps. Wanted to play Mason Moragan, but it just didn't make sense to get him out there on the field. So even though a guy doesn't play, there's still some really good players that didn't see the field this year. I just literally was in my office early this morning with a player, and I shared with him, some of you old school guys remember the name Marv Cook. I was a great player at Iowa. When I went to Iowa, he was kind of the man. He was the tight end. I was a walk-on outside linebacker. He was beating my head in every day, and I didn't know that, right? But I found out later in that year when they told Marv's story that he had spent 3 years on look team, never even really played, right? And turned into being an All-American, drafted by the Patriots, and an incredible NFL career. And I've seen that play out so many times. My first Big Ten championship quarterback, Scott Tolzien, never saw the field the first 3 years. But in today's world, guys have the urgency because of social media that they feel they got to be out there right away, and sometimes it just takes everybody a little longer.
Yeah, if I could follow up just real quick. Something like Welcher just returning kicks, basically, or Eleno just kicking off. Is that a little different? Like just, hey, we can use you right now, whereas before you might have sat him and say, hey, you're going to be better in 5 years.
So 2 different conversations. David Elano, when I brought him in, he wanted to obviously compete for the starting kicking and field goal job. Obviously, Caleb kicked the ball pretty well this year, but we thought that he could help us in the kickoff game. And then when it came time to we had to make a decision, he was after 2 or 3 games. I said, hey, how do you feel about it? And he looked at me dead in the eye and he said, I don't need a redshirt year. Right? So believe in what you believe, and confidence is a great thing. So that took care of David. Obviously, he had some struggles, but we stayed with it. And I think after meeting with him yesterday, I think he's really focused on what he needs to do. Canary is on the flip side of it. He's a guy that came in, played, and I told him, hey, I think the thing you have to look at is obviously returning kicks. You're going to get in some snaps from line of scrimmage, but a year from now, the value of you playing in most games this year, game speed, game ready, and nothing more than that last play, right? Like, he obviously had the ball in the inside arm, got hit, the ball went in the air, and they scored 7 points without our defense being on the field. The value in that, even though it's incredibly painful to live through, right, is kind of what I said earlier, right? I'm disappointed, but I'm not discouraged, and hopefully he has that.
Coach, penalty yards this year, I think you're worse than Big Ten penalty yards.
You know what we had in the last game?
What's that?
I remember we had in the last game?
That's a good point. What do you do?
Well, you already wrote the story, so let me do it right for you.
Going forward, what do you do to work on that?
I think that one of the things that cause you to lose games is penalties, mental errors, and turnovers, right? But there was a game this year where I believe we had 12 or 14, which is incredibly disappointing. But on the same account, at the end of the year, we had 1, and I believe we had against Iowa 5. I think the consistency in what things are called is something that you always got to keep in mind. But a team that finished the year with 1 penalty, I'm excited about the growth they had.
Coach, if you're looking for defensive lineman in the portal, how much more ammo does it give you to have a guy like Johnny Newton who you can point to that with all the postseason accolades and success?
It's a great point, but I also think it's easy for us to not to point Johnny Newton, but to Keith Randolph, right? So, like, there are very few schools in the country to have 2 guys decorated the way they've been decorated, to be achieving the way they have. It's been hard, to be quite honest, to recruit D linemen the last 2 years because of those 2. In today's world, many kids don't want to go and sit behind someone, right? So it's really been difficult, to be honest, to get good, in my opinion, and I'm excited about what we recruited and where we're at. But yeah, we've literally, we got an entire set of graphics and an entire set of information that we send. Literally, I was on a Zoom call last night with a guy that we believe is extremely talented and can help us, and we use those 2 guys as case examples. And then Denzel Daxon, like a story within a story. Denzel was a part-time player, starter at a MAC school that we got him out of, and we got him playing. In my opinion, JMO had him playing as good a football. Our last 2 years, both of our nose guards have been priority free agent guys, and I think Denzel not only played himself into that position, possibly even higher. So we've been able to put our guys in a position to have success, and it should be, hopefully good for us to recruit to in the future.
How much is NIL, the opportunity here, a part of your recruiting conversation? And how do you feel like you guys are operating in that space?
NIL is an unprecedented level right now. Obviously, you've gotten a lot of sound bites from coaches, not only in our league, but around the world, right? Like, all I can do is control the one we're in. I would just say daily, I am, whatever adjective you want to use, but astounded, blown away, unbelievable, however it is. Like, there's things that are going on that are just insane, and I believe will lead to something breaking, right? Like, I don't know what it's going to be, but for me, I'm in huge favor of an advocate of NIL. It allowed us the opportunity to keep guys that would really forego a draft. That, you look at Johnny in particular, Keith, probably Isaiah and Julian. Those 4 guys, basically had a chance to leave and be drafted a year ago, but because of the NIL opportunity in the world that they saw, come back, and those guys could gain anywhere from $5 to $25 million, right? And I think that's the side that people probably saw in this whole world why NIL would be good. But on the flip side, now you see and hear and witness guys that are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars to leave and transition. And the 3 things that are getting lost in this whole thing is APR rates, right? Like, we've done such a great job in this profession of getting graduation rates to look out for kids beyond what's in front of them. So I think that's going to tremendously hurt. Roster continuity is something I think that there's a little appreciation for, like guys learning how to do things together, and for a coach to understand this guy's here and he's going to be here the next year, and allows you to build and kind of set your roster a year or 2 in advance. I think that's getting harder and harder to withhold because of this. And then third thing, and probably the biggest thing, is just, I'm in this profession. I didn't get into teaching, right? I got into coaching because I want to affect their life on a daily basis. And, for the most part, it hasn't hit us like it's hit other places, but I've seen it. I've witnessed it. We've been in recruiting where we really think we're going to a certain direction, and something changes literally overnight, and it's nothing more than NIL related, and gets extremely frustrated. I think, we haven't witnessed it here, but you're hearing horror stories now of kids that were promised certain things and they weren't delivered, and that puts them in hard spots, right? I feel very blessed that Josh and the Icon Collective has been pretty straightforward, run to an unbelievable level of efficiency. It's just something that needs to continue to grow and grow and grow, and we'll live by the standards that we have here at Illinois, but you are affected by what's going on around you for sure.
So Brett, what is
Time for just a couple more here.
what is your approach with NIL?
What is my approach?
Yeah, like, how do you discuss?
Well,
it?
I think it's fun, right? It's fun when kids, like, we're not in the conversation as coaches, right? Like, they're in every one of the kids that have an NIL agreement or contracts that are mostly through our collectives, but they can do some one-offs too, right? And kids are contacted by people in their community. I think it's just awesome, right? One of the first ones that I identified was, right, so you're from Illinois, but every one of these kids from wherever they're from, they're the most popular people in their towns, right? Or not, but you know what I'm saying. Like, Hank Beatty's pretty popular, right? In Rochester, right? You go to all these kids from around, even up in Chicago, guys from Ohio. I remember when I was with Josh McCray in Enterprise, Alabama, everybody loved Josh, right? So I think those things are awesome. For me personally, to reward our players for what they've done, I think is a great thing. The things that, you know, probably get frustrating are the unforeseen things and the things that have malicious intent. I think just like every aspect of life, abuse leads to restrictions, right? And when this whole thing started, it sounded like a great thing, but I think there's abuses that have happened, and at some point there's going to be restrictions. But until that happens, we're just trying to take advantage of the opportunities that it has for our players and for us as coaches. Be smart, be aware, and understand the situations. I definitely have worked very hard to get to the job that we're in. I ask all of our coaches to follow that model, right? Like, we've worked hard to get to where we are, and we don't put ourselves in a position by abusing something that can't be done.
Right, where do you see Luke from a developmental standpoint?
Luke?
Altmaier, from a developmental standpoint?
Yeah, you know, he probably grew more in the last 2 weeks than he has the whole year, right? So Luke's a very intelligent, very aware, a very gifted player. You know, I gave stats in here, I believe, from his post Penn State game to where he left the game into Minnesota, and his touchdown to interception ratio was pretty significant. Number of yards average. He was a first-year starter that had began to evolve and do some really good things, and got knocked out of the game. And obviously, John jumped in and took over. There was some different factors that weighed into that, right? But I thought the last 2 weeks as a backup quarterback, he saw things differently. Something, you know, he can answer or attest to when he gets a chance to talk to you guys next spring. But like, I think he really grew, and it's been fun to watch him. Excited for him and the rest of that room continue to see where they can go, because they had a lot of growth experience this year.
But it seems like the offense really found its stride
So wait a
in that
minute,
back
Bob, we'll
half.
finish with that.
In that back half of the season, offensively, you had a production uptick. What do you think was behind that? What can that mean for you guys building into?
I think a couple things. We ran the ball more effectively, without a doubt. You know, we had a couple games where we ran the ball, and I think that has to be a big part of what we do. I've always said, like, you know, good teams do three things: run the ball, defend the run, and cover kicks, right? And for the most part, we began to run the ball a little more effectively. We're still being able to throw with some efficiency. I think we cut down our sack margin, which was huge. We can't survive negative plays, right? So when those negative plays began to become less, that was when we began to move forward more. And I think just, you know, Barry and the offensive staff kind of becoming a little bit more comfortable. There's two new coaches on both sides, and it took a while to get that continuity to go. Conversations I've had with Barry and Bart and the offensive staff, I think the direction of what we want is a little bit more clear now. I think based on what we have coming back and what we're projecting to get.
I apologize.
Finish it up.
I apologize if you addressed this before. Jim Leonard, what's his role going forward? Do you know?
Yeah, Jimmy's been a great asset to us. You know, he was a guy that, I'm not saying he was full time in the fact that he was here, but he couldn't be on the field. He wasn't with us on game day. Jimmy and I have been close for a long time. I think he's got a lot of things coming at him, right? And I can't speak on anybody's behalf, but whatever his direction is, obviously he could come back here, but I think the world is unknown, right? And I couldn't recommend anybody higher. He's an awesome, awesome person.
All right.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, guys.